Like most things, a great golf shot can be upset by starting off incorrectly. Now, what we're going to look at today is how you should set your upper body, because this is critical for allowing you to use your body correctly, especially your upper body, but also arms and hands, and it has implications for the entire swing. So many players make the errors that I'm going to talk about in their setup. It just makes the whole swing really, really difficult. And I've sort of played recently with players, and every time there's someone in the group who needs this advice. So maybe this is for you. When I set myself up, if I think of my golf swing as a lever system, which it is, the lever system is actually moved by my upper body. Well, it's actually moved by my entire body, but the more stable I can keep and the more centered I can keep my upper body, the easier it's going to be for me to be able to swing the club on the correct path. So first couple of things about setup. With my upper body, when I set myself up, if I'm standing here holding the club, I've taken my grip, arms are just in front of me, my hands are a little bit forward of the center line of my body, but my spine when I'm standing up is completely vertical. Now, my right arm is a little bit more bent than what my left arm is, and my right hand's lower on the grip. So that means that when I set myself up over the ball, my shoulders are not going to be level. My right shoulder is going to be lower than my left shoulder, but my feeling is that my spine is still fairly vertical. So when I'm setting myself up, I don't want to lean my upper body a long way away from the target. If we look at, say, angles of the spine and what implications that has for the swing, and again, this is can be varied a little bit depending on what players do with their hands and arms, but this is typically what happens. So if we look at say my takeaway swing path, when I lean my body away from the target, now it's harder to see that I'm leaning away from this view here, but as I swing back, my upper body wants to rotate this way, and we can see that the path that the club wants to follow is to swing around behind me. And of course the opposite is going to happen. If I set myself up and my upper body is leaning forward at the start, then as I swing back, my path wants to move this way. So set your spine as vertical as you can, knowing that you will still have a difference in level between your shoulders. Now that might feel really strange to begin with, but that's fine. Check your spine lean in a mirror or a reflection of some description, just to check and see how you are set up. Now the other thing is I want to keep my head, my neck alignment the same as my spine. So when I'm setting myself up, when I at address, if my head's leaning either too far away or my eyes are not angled, say, parallel to my target line, then that can also influence my perception of how the club's moving. So I want to keep my head square with my spine, or my spine still in alignment. So when I'm setting myself up to play my shot, you can see that my head's actually rotated very, very slightly this way when I'm setting myself up. Now as I begin to turn, my head will actually rotate slightly the other way with my body turn, but I want to set it up so it's in a good alignment. The next part is having a look at how our posture works. So again, if I set myself up here, a really common thing that I see with a lot of players is that their upper body will be very, very rounded. Now a couple of reasons for that. One is that if there's a lot of tension through the front of the shoulders or through the front of the chest, that will bring the shoulders around. That often goes with extra tension through the arms as well. So when I'm setting myself up, if I'm standing here correctly, I'll let my shoulders hang. So now I'm not pulling my shoulders down, I'm not pulling my shoulders back. When I'm setting myself up, I'm just letting my shoulders hang. So you can see from a standing posture, I've got my normal spinal curvatures. Now as we age, it's not a comment on my age by the way, but as we age, upper body posture will tend to become a little bit stiffer and we will appear to be a little bit more rounded. Also, spines, while they have the same general curvature, can change a little bit from person to person. So you look at a young guy who's, or girl, and when they set themselves up, their spine's perfectly flat. That's not optimal. It may be for that player, but it's not optimal for the general golfing population. So just keep that in mind. But if you're very rounded, then we'll definitely look to become a little bit flatter. So when I set myself up, spine's fairly flat. Now here's the key. When I tilt my upper body forward, if I tilt from my hips, you can see that my belt line immediately changes. And now that's going to make it easier for me to keep my upper body posture. If my belt line doesn't change, so now I'm bending through the middle of my upper body, then I'll become very, very rounded. So this tilting forward from the hips really makes a massive difference to how your upper body sets at a dress. So now, if we look from front on, my spine's reasonably vertical, but my shoulders are not level, of course. And from side on, I've got this tilt from my hips so that my upper body is reasonably set correctly. So they're the key things that when you are setting yourself up correctly, you'll be able to stand so you can hit the ball or set up to hit the ball as well as you possibly can. Now it doesn't really matter which shot you've got. If we keep in mind these principles, they might change a tiny little bit. So for example, short shots will still have that vertical spine. In fact, it becomes much more important with, say, putts and chips and short pitches. And in fact, your shoulders will be more level with those shorter shots, but the principle doesn't really change in that we're trying to stay fairly vertical through here, very slight lean. With your driver, because the ball's positioned further forward, the upper body will have a tiny little bit more lean. But again, when you get to your driver, don't make that lean excessive away from the target because it will have that influence on your swing path that I mentioned earlier. But practice those things, make sure that your upper body is set correctly. That's going to have a huge influence on how your arms set and then how the club moves.